The first encounter, the alien fleet hovered above the distant planet, its ships casting dark shadows over the rocky terrain. On the surface, a human army stood ready for battle. The alien commander, Zorak, watched from his ship's bridge, staring at the human soldiers below. He chuckled to himself, thinking how easy it would be to wipe them out. The humans had just landed, and their armor was unlike anything Zorak had ever seen before. It wasn't sleek and polished like the alien battlesuits. It wasn't made of advanced materials or energy shields. It looked primitive. The armor was bulky and clunky, as if it had been thrown together by a group of unskilled engineers. The helmets were wide, and the body armor was thick, with strange plates covering their limbs. To Zorak, it seemed like a joke. They think this will protect them? Zorak muttered to his officers, shaking his head. His soldiers, dressed in their advanced combat gear, looked at the humans with disdain. The human soldiers were lined up in formation, ready for whatever the aliens would throw at them. Their weapons were nothing compared to the aliens' devastating energy guns and plasma rifles. The humans had rifles that looked old, their bodies encased in armor that didn't seem to offer much protection. Yet, there was something about their stance, something in their eyes, that Zorak didn't quite understand. His officers exchanged confused glances as they looked at the human soldiers. They had expected to see fear, hesitation, or even panic. But the humans were calm, steady. Some of them even smiled as if they were not afraid of the war that was about to unfold. "We should make quick work of them," Zorak said, his voice cold. "Fire at will." The order was given, and the alien ships unleashed a barrage of laser fire. The sky above the battlefield turned red as blasts rained down on the human army. Explosions rocked the ground, sending clouds of dust into the air. Zorak watched through his viewport, eagerly anticipating the moment when the human forces would break apart, crumple under the firepower of his fleet. But something strange happened. The human soldiers didn't collapse. They didn't scatter in panic. Instead, their armor absorbed the blasts. It wasn't perfect, not by any means. Some of the soldiers fell, their armor scorched and burned, but most of them remained standing. The energy from the explosion seemed to vanish as it hit their suits, almost like the armor was swallowing the energy. Zorak blinked in surprise. His officers gasped. It didn't make sense. The armor should have been torn apart, but instead, it seemed to shrug off the blasts as if they were nothing. "They're still standing," one of his officers exclaimed. "What kind of armor is this?" Zorak's eyes narrowed. He had seen many battles, many races, but never had he encountered such resilience. The humans' armor was not the key here. There was something more to them, something unexpected. "Keep firing," Zorak ordered, frustration rising in his chest. "Don't let them get too close." But the humans didn't retreat. They advanced instead, moving forward in perfect synchronization, their rifles raised, their faces determined. Zorak couldn't help but feel an eerie sense of admiration, mixed with anger, at how these primitive humans were withstanding his fleet's most powerful weapons. As the battle raged on, the human forces didn't stop. They moved through the dust and smoke, using their strange armor to absorb and redirect the energy from the alien fire. The battlefield became a chaotic dance of fire and movement. The humans, though outnumbered and outgunned, didn't falter. They were relentless. Zorak watched in disbelief as the human soldiers pushed forward. His fleet had fired everything they had, yet the humans stood their ground, moving with an eerie confidence. Was their armor really this powerful, or was it something else? Something in the way they fought, something in their spirit that refused to break? Impossible. Zorak whispered as the battle continued to unfold. He had never seen anything like this before. Just then, a loud explosion echoed from the battlefield. A large human soldier, his armor covered in scorch marks, surged forward with incredible speed. He fired his rifle with deadly precision, taking out 2 of Zorak's elite warriors in a single shot. Zorak clenched his fists in fury. This battle was supposed to be over in minutes. The humans weren't supposed to be standing this long. They weren't supposed to be fighting back. Yet here they were, unbroken, undeterred, and with no signs of fear in their eyes. "They're stronger than they look," Zorak murmured, his voice barely audible. "What is this?" The alien commander had no answers. But one thing was certain. This would not be as easy as he thought. This should work to set the stage with suspense and intrigue, keeping your audience engaged right from the start. Unexpected resilience, the battle continued to rage on as the alien forces unleashed everything they had upon the human soldiers. Zorak watched as the humans, despite their crude armor, somehow managed to stay on their feet. The lasers and plasma blasts hit their suits, but instead of disintegrating them, the blasts seemed to simply vanish. It was as if the armor absorbed the very energy of the attacks and redistributed it back into the battlefield. Zorak couldn't make sense of it. His soldiers had never faced anything like this before. He looked at his officers, who were equally confused, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. "How are they doing this?" one of his commanders asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Our weapons should be enough to destroy them." Zorak's frustration was growing. He had come to this planet expecting a quick victory, but now it seemed the humans were more than just survivors. They were fighting back with a relentless will that confused him. The alien forces were trained for quick and brutal strikes, yet the humans were showing no sign of weakness. They were like machines pushing forward, unyielding even under the heaviest of fire. He looked through his viewport and saw a group of humans, their armor battered and scorched, continuing to march forward. They were unafraid, their faces focused, determined. Some even smiled as they advanced, as if they were enjoying the challenge. Zorak couldn't understand how they were so calm, so fearless. The battle should have been over by now, but instead, it was only just beginning. "Move in closer," Zorak ordered, his voice cold. "Prepare for ground assault. We'll finish this face to face. The armor can't protect them from close combat." The alien troops began to descend from their ships, deploying on the battlefield. They landed in perfectly coordinated formations, ready to finish off the human soldiers. Zorak believed that at this range, the human armor would finally fail, that it would crumble under the weight of his superior weapons. But again, he was wrong. The human soldiers did not retreat. They closed the gap and moved in with terrifying precision. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, each soldier anticipating the movements of the others. It was as if they knew exactly what to do, exactly how to fight, even without superior technology. They used their armor's strange abilities to redirect energy, turning the alien fire into an advantage. The humans dodged, ducked, and weaved, their armor absorbing the energy from the blasts, redirecting it into their weapons. Each shot fired by a human soldier was more powerful than the last, as though the energy from the alien attacks was fueling their rifles. The aliens began to falter. Their once perfect formations broke apart as the humans struck from all sides. One by one, the aliens fell, their once impenetrable defenses crumbling under the unexpected resilience of the humans. Zorak could see his troops becoming disorganized, retreating in fear, unsure of how to handle this strange new enemy. The human soldiers didn't just survive, they were thriving. They seemed to feed off the energy of the battle, growing stronger with every shot, every explosion, every enemy that fell before them. It was as if the human armor wasn't just protecting them, it was making them more powerful, adapting to each moment in ways the aliens had never seen before. Zorak clenched his fists in frustration, his mind racing to understand the mystery of the humans. He had watched them carefully, studied their every move, but still, he could not understand what was happening. This was not a battle they should have won. Their armor was primitive, their weapons outdated. Yet here they were, defying all logic. And turning the tide of the war, he watched as another human soldier, a young woman, stepped forward. Her armor was barely holding together, scorched and battered, but she was still standing. She aimed her rifle with precision, taking down another of Zorak's elite warriors in one shot. The alien soldier didn't even have time to react before he fell to the ground, his body crumpling in defeat. The woman didn't even flinch. She moved on to the next target, her focus unwavering, her determination stronger than ever. Zorak had to admit it. These humans were not like anything he had encountered before. They weren't afraid of death. They were driven by something more powerful, something he couldn't understand. It wasn't just their armor. It was something in their spirit, their will to survive, their refusal to back down no matter the odds. "They're not like us," Zorak murmured, his voice barely audible. "They're different." The battle was far from over, but the alien commander knew one thing for sure. The humans were no longer just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with, and Zorak was beginning to realize that they were capable of far more than anyone had ever expected. This battle, which should have been over in moments, had turned into something far bigger, something far more dangerous. As the fight continued, Zorak felt a strange feeling settle in his chest. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the humans. This part continues the flow from the first one, building suspense as the human soldier's armor surprises the aliens and shifts the battle in their favor. The human mechanic, the alien commander. Zorak was not a man to admit mistakes easily. He had watched in disbelief as his most advanced weapons failed to break through the human armor. His soldiers, some of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy, had been outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by the relentless human forces. As the battle continued, Zorak's frustration deepened. He couldn't understand what was happening. The human's armor should have been destroyed by now. Instead, it was only getting stronger. The armor wasn't just absorbing the energy from the attacks, it was using it to fuel the humans' every move. Zorak watched as the humans continued to fight, their armor barely scratched as they tore through his elite warriors with ease. He needed answers. He needed to understand how this was possible. Zorak called for a meeting with his senior officers. They gathered around him in the war room, their faces grim. "We need to know what we're dealing with," Zorak said, his voice cold. "Why aren't their suits breaking down? What is this armor made of?" One of his officers, a scientist named Zara, spoke up. "It's unlike anything we've ever seen, Commander. The armor is absorbing energy, but it's not just protecting them. It's adapting. The more we attack, the stronger they get." "Adapt?" Zorak repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "That doesn't make sense. What kind of technology could do that?" Zara hesitated. "I don't know, sir. But there's something even more unusual about it. It's not just the armor. There's a human mechanic, a civilian working on it. He's the one who designed the modifications." Zorak's eyes narrowed. A civilian? That was unexpected. The aliens had underestimated the humans, but now it seemed they were underestimating them even more. How could a mechanic, someone without the kind of military training or advanced technology they possessed, create something so powerful? "Bring him to me," Zorak ordered. "I want to speak to this mechanic." It didn't take long before the human was brought into the command center. He was a tall, unassuming figure, with rough hands that told the story of a life spent working with machines. His clothes were simple, nothing like the advanced uniforms Zorak's officers wore. The mechanic's name was Samuel, and he looked almost out of place standing among the alien commanders. His eyes were tired, but they were sharp, and his face showed no fear. "What are you doing here?" Zorak demanded, his tone harsh. "You're just a mechanic. How did you create this? This armor?" Samuel met Zorak's gaze without flinching. "I didn't create the armor, sir. I just fixed it." "Fixed it?" Zorak asked, his disbelief growing. This armor is beyond anything we've seen in the galaxy. It absorbs energy. It adapts to the battlefield. It makes your soldiers stronger. How could you have done that with such primitive technology? Samuel smiled faintly. It's not primitive. It's Earth technology. It's a system we've been developing for years. The armor isn't about just protecting the wearer. It's about taking the energy from the environment, the battle, the movement, and using it to power the suit. We've learned how to use every bit of energy to our advantage. Zorak's mind raced. Earth technology? How could a race so seemingly weak and primitive have developed something so advanced? The armor didn't make sense. It shouldn't work. But here it was, standing before him. His fleet's weapons had no effect on it, and the humans kept getting stronger as the battle continued. How is it possible? Zorak asked, his voice barely a whisper. Your technology, your people, they are nothing compared to the races of the galaxy. How could you have created something like this? Samuel shrugged. Sometimes you don't need the best technology. You just need to think differently. We've always been adaptable, always found a way to survive. The armor is just a tool. The real power comes from the people inside it. The will to survive. The determination to never give up. That's what makes us strong. Zorak couldn't believe what he was hearing. This mechanic, this human, was speaking as if his entire species was capable of defeating the most advanced forces in the galaxy, with nothing but their will and their ingenuity. Zorak had fought wars for centuries, commanding armies far superior to anything the humans could muster, yet now he found himself facing an enemy unlike any he had ever known. What do you mean by survive? Zorak asked, his curiosity rising despite himself. Samuel's eyes glinted with something that almost looked like pride. Humanity isn't like other races. We've fought to survive since the dawn of time. We don't have the most powerful weapons or the most advanced technology. But we have something else. We have the ability to adapt. We can take what we have and make it better. We can take what we're given and turn it into something amazing. And when we're pushed to the edge, we fight like nothing else. That's why we survive. Zorak stood silent for a moment, processing Samuel's words. It was clear that the humans were more than just a nuisance. They weren't just using their armor to fight. They were using their very will to survive, their drive to win, to overcome any obstacle. Zorak had seen that kind of determination before, but never in a race so seemingly weak. The mechanic, standing before him, had given him a glimpse of the human spirit, a spirit that could not be broken. And that, more than anything else, was what terrified him. This part delves into the human mechanic's explanation of the armor and how it works, giving the aliens a new understanding of humanity's unexpected resilience. Revealing the truth, Zorak stood in silence, his mind reeling from the words of the human mechanic. What he had just learned shattered everything he had believed about the humans. They were more than just survivors. They were innovators, adapting and evolving with every challenge they faced. The more Zorak thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. The armor wasn't some miracle technology. It was a reflection of the humans themselves. It was their ingenuity, their determination to survive no matter the odds. They had used the simplest of resources, their natural instincts, and built something that no advanced race had ever imagined. This revelation sent a chill down Zorak's spine. The humans had found a way to level the playing field, to make their primitive technology not only competitive, but potentially superior. As Zorak paced back and forth in his command center, his thoughts were interrupted by a message from one of his officers. "Commander Zorak, there's something you need to see." The officer's voice was tight with urgency. "The humans are advancing again. They're not stopping." Zorak gritted his teeth and turned toward the viewport. Sure enough, the human forces were on the move again. Their armor had taken a beating, but now it seemed even more resilient, more alive. As the battle progressed, it became clear that the humans weren't merely surviving, they were thriving. Every blast that hit their armor seemed to empower them, turning the tide of battle in their favor. The alien forces, once confident in their technological superiority, were now scrambling to adapt to the unexpected advantage the humans had gained. Zorak clenched his fists in frustration. The more he watched, the more he realized that their weapons were useless against this new form of warfare. The humans weren't fighting to win, they were fighting to survive, and in doing so, they were becoming more powerful with every passing moment. He could see it now. The human soldiers, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, were outsmarting and outlasting his best warriors. Their armor, once thought to be a weakness, had become a weapon in itself. But even though the human forces were gaining ground, Zorak couldn't bring himself to surrender. He had fought too long, commanded too many victories, to be defeated by something as stupid as human armor. He was determined to figure out how it worked and to break it, no matter the cost. Zorak's thoughts turned back to Samuel, the mechanic. Perhaps in his arrogance, Zorak had underestimated the man. Samuel wasn't just a mechanic, he was the key to understanding how the humans were achieving this victory. If Zorak could learn how to reverse the armor's abilities, he could finally crush the humans and end this rebellion. But there was one thing that Zorak didn't understand. Why hadn't Samuel revealed the full potential of the armor? Why hadn't he told him everything? Zorak sent for Samuel once again, this time to demand answers. When the mechanic arrived, Zorak wasted no time. "You've told me what the armor does," Zorak said, his voice sharp. "But you haven't told me how it works. How can it absorb energy? How can it adapt to every attack? What is its core function?" Samuel stood calmly in front of the alien commander, his eyes unwavering. "You want to know the secret? The truth is simple, Commander. The armor isn't just about defense. It's about understanding the energy of the world around you. It's about learning from every hit, every blast. We designed it to adapt, to respond to every attack, to every change in the environment. The more we are pushed, the stronger we become. We don't just take hits, we learn from them. And that's how we survive." Zorak listened carefully, his frustration growing. "But how? How can this be possible? You're telling me that you've built a system that can literally absorb energy from the battlefield and turn it into power for your soldiers. That makes no sense." Samuel smiled faintly. "It doesn't need to make sense to you, Commander. It just needs to work. The armor uses the energy from every strike and redistributes it. It's a closed loop. The more energy it receives, the more it powers the soldier inside. It's not magic, it's just good design. And it's the way we've always operated. We adapt, we learn, and we overcome." Zorak's mind was spinning. He had never encountered anything like this before. The idea that a species as seemingly primitive as humans could have created a technology that could harness and adapt to energy was baffling. It didn't just break the laws of warfare, it redefined them. The humans had found a way to turn their most vulnerable aspect into their greatest strength. The very thing that Zorak thought would make them weak had become their greatest asset. "Why? Haven't you told us this from the start?" Zorak asked, his voice low and filled with anger. "Why hide this power?" Samuel shrugged. "Because you wouldn't have believed us. You would have laughed at us just like you're doing now. But now you see the truth. Our armor is not the key. It's the will behind it. And that's something you can't defeat with weapons alone." Zorak's eyes narrowed. He couldn't deny the truth in Samuel's words. The humans had achieved something unimaginable. They had taken their weaknesses and turned them into strengths. And no matter how advanced Zorak's fleet was, no matter how powerful his weapons, he was facing something more dangerous than technology. He was facing a race of people who would never give up, no matter the odds. This part deepens the mystery. Behind the armor, revealing the human mechanics design and how it works, all while pushing Zorak further into confusion and frustration as he faces the unexpected power of the humans. The tipping point. Zorak stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring at the holographic display of the battlefield. The situation was growing dire, and despite all his tactics, his forces were losing ground. The humans, with their absurd armor, were pushing his fleet back. The battle that should have been over in minutes had stretched on for hours, and now it was clear that victory was slipping from his grasp. His most elite troops had been defeated, and the human soldiers seemed unstoppable, growing stronger with every attack. Zorak clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. How could this be happening? His mind raced, trying to find a solution. Every move he had made, every tactic he had deployed, had failed. His forces were scattered, retreating in disarray, and the humans were closing in. It wasn't just their armor, it was their ability to adapt, to learn, to push forward, no matter the cost. It was something Zorak had never encountered before. "Commander," one of his officers said, breaking Zorak's concentration. "The humans are advancing again. Their forces are getting closer. They're using their armor to its full potential now." Zorak's eyes flickered toward the officer, his mind still racing. "What do you mean they're using it to its full potential?" He snapped. "They've already pushed us to the edge. How much stronger can they get?" The officer hesitated, clearly unsure of how to explain. "The armor. It's not just defending them, it's becoming a weapon. With each strike they take, the humans are getting faster, stronger, and their weapons are more powerful. They're no longer just absorbing our energy, they're redirecting it back at us with greater force. It's like nothing we've seen before." Zorak's gaze turned back to the battlefield, his mind struggling to understand. The humans weren't just defending, they were using the very energy of his attacks to turn the tide of the battle. The more he struck, the more it seemed to empower them. It was as if every explosion, every laser blast, fed into their strength, pushing them further than Zorak's forces could go. His own fleet had become the fuel for the humans' relentless march forward. "We need to stop them," Zorak said, his voice cold and determined. "This armor, this power, it's too much. We can't keep fighting like this. There has to be a way to break through." His officer nodded. "We've tried everything, Commander. Our weapons, our tactics, they're not working. The humans are too adaptable. Their armor is absorbing everything, using it against us." Zorak's mind raced, desperate for a solution. He thought back to the earlier conversations with the human mechanic, Samuel. The man had made it clear that the armor was designed to adapt, to learn, and to use every bit of energy to its advantage. Zorak had dismissed it as a simple trick, a fluke of technology. But now, as he watched his fleet crumble, he realized that it was much more than that. It wasn't just the armor that made the humans powerful, it was their ability to overcome anything, to take what was thrown at them and turn it into an advantage. Zorak's eyes narrowed as he watched. Another wave of human soldiers surged forward, their weapons firing with deadly precision. The aliens had underestimated them at every turn, and now, it seemed it was too late to reverse the damage. "Prepare for the final assault," Zorak ordered. "We will push back with everything we have left. If the humans won't surrender, we'll make them regret it." As the order was given, Zorak's fleet prepared for a last-ditch effort. They launched wave after wave of attacks, determined to break the human forces once and for all. The aliens knew it was their last chance. If they failed now, they would lose everything. But as the alien ships poured their fire into the humans' position, something unexpected happened. The human soldiers, battered and bruised, did not retreat. They did not panic. They fought harder, their armor absorbing the energy from every blast and returning it with twice the force. The humans were no longer just resisting, they were overpowering the alien forces, turning their attacks into a devastating counteroffensive. Zorak's forces faltered, unsure of how to handle the onslaught. The tipping point had arrived. The humans were no longer just defending themselves. They were dominating the battlefield. Zorak's desperation grew as he watched his fleet struggle to hold their ground. The tide of battle had completely shifted, and the humans had become the ones in control. Zorak's fleet, once confident in their technological superiority, was now retreating. Their weapons, their tactics, their strength, it was all useless against the humans' unyielding will to survive. The alien forces had underestimated the humans' power, and now they were paying the price. The commander stood at the edge of defeat, his mind racing as he watched the humans press on, undeterred by the relentless fire. The more his forces fought, the stronger the humans became. It was clear that this battle was no longer about technology. It was about the human spirit, the relentless drive to survive, to win, no matter what. Zorak realized with a sense of dread that he was facing a force unlike any he had ever encountered. The humans were not just fighting, they were winning. And no matter how much firepower he threw at them, no matter how advanced his technology, the humans would never back down. They were the true power on this battlefield, and there was nothing Zorak could do to stop them. In this part, the tide of the battle shifts completely in favor of the humans, as their armor becomes more of a weapon than a defense, and Zorak faces the reality that his forces are being overwhelmed by the unexpected strength of humanity's resilience, the human strategist. Zorak stood at the command center, his face grim as he watched the holographic map of the battlefield. The situation had gone from bad to worse. The alien forces, once confident in their superiority, were now on the defensive, struggling to hold their ground against the humans. Zorak's eyes scanned the display, but it was clear that his fleet was losing. The humans, despite being vastly outnumbered and seemingly under-equipped, were pushing back with relentless precision. Every time he thought he had a chance to regain control, the humans adapted and countered. Zorak had underestimated them, and now he was paying the price. "They're using the terrain against us," Zorak muttered, his frustration mounting. The humans were not just relying on their armor, they were using their surroundings, drawing the alien forces into traps and ambushes. It was as if they knew exactly how to exploit the weaknesses of his fleet. "Sir, they've reconfigured their tactics," one of his officers said, pointing to the updated battle map. "They're using smaller, faster units to flank us. They're coordinating their movements with pinpoint accuracy. We can't keep up with them." Zorak clenched his jaw. He had never faced an enemy so adaptable. His fleet was trained for large-scale, direct confrontations, but the humans were forcing him into guerrilla warfare. Their tactics were unconventional, and they were making the most of every opportunity to strike. Every time Zorak thought he had a clear shot, the humans found a way to slip through his defenses. It was as if they were always one step ahead, always anticipating his next move. "They're playing with us," Zorak growled. "They're not just trying to survive anymore. They're toying with us. We need to change our approach. We need to hit them with everything we have." His officers exchanged uncertain glances. "Sir, we've already deployed our best troops. Our elite forces are on the front lines. We've used our most powerful weapons, and they still keep coming. They're too resourceful." Zorak's mind raced. He needed to think beyond just brute force. The humans weren't fighting like any race he had encountered before. They weren't trying to overpower his fleet. They were outsmarting it, outmaneuvering it at every turn. He had to acknowledge it now. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving, and they were using their knowledge of the battlefield, their ability to adapt, to turn the tide in their favor. A thought flashed into Zorak's mind. He remembered Samuel, the human mechanic, the one who had explained how their armor worked. He had said that it wasn't just about defense. It was about using every energy source to their advantage, about redirecting the flow of power. What if the humans were using the very energy from the battle to fuel their strategy? What if the armor itself was evolving, not just in response to attacks, but to the way they fought? Zorak realized that the humans had learned how to use the energy of their enemies' actions against them, turning their mistakes into opportunities. They figured out how to make us fight their battle, Zorak muttered. They're not just defending, they're controlling the pace of the fight. They're letting us burn through our resources while we waste time trying to crush them. And in the meantime, they're growing stronger. His officers remained silent, watching him closely. Zorak's gaze flickered back to the battlefield. The humans had organized their forces into smaller, highly mobile units that could strike quickly and retreat before the aliens could retaliate. They were like shadows, slipping in and out of the chaos, always appearing when the aliens least expected it. The aliens were bogged down in a war of attrition, and it was clear the humans had the upper hand. They've adapted, Zorak said quietly, the realization hitting him hard. We've been fighting them the wrong way from the start. We thought we could crush them with sheer force, but they're using their strengths against us. Their armor, their tactics, their strategy, they've turned the battlefield into their domain. Zorak's mind raced as he watched the humans' movements on the holographic display. He had been wrong about them from the very beginning. He had thought their armor was their greatest strength, but it wasn't. It was their ability to adapt, to evolve, that made them so dangerous. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win, and they had learned how to turn every obstacle into an advantage. Their strategy was a perfect reflection of their species, relentless, unpredictable, and impossible to defeat by conventional means. I need a new plan, Zorak said, his voice heavy with determination. We can't keep chasing them in circles. We need to take the fight to them, force them to react to us. We need to disrupt their strategy and take away their ability to adapt. As the command center scrambled to implement the new plan, Zorak felt a sinking feeling in his gut. The humans had already won the psychological battle. They had made it clear that they were not just warriors, they were strategists, thinkers, problem solvers. And in this game of war, the aliens had underestimated them at every turn. Zorak realized that even if his forces managed to regroup, even if they somehow managed to push the humans back, they would never truly win. The humans' ability to adapt was not something that could be easily broken. They were too resilient, too intelligent, and far too resourceful. The more the aliens fought, the stronger the humans became. And in the end, it wouldn't matter how many battles they won. The humans had already proven that they were capable of changing the rules of war. In this part, the human forces continued to outsmart and outmaneuver the alien fleet, using their adaptability and strategic thinking to gain the upper hand. Zorak realizes that their strength lies not only in their armor, but in their ability to evolve and turn every challenge into an advantage. The final showdown. The air was thick with tension as the last remnants of Zorak's fleet tried to regroup. Their ships scattered across the battlefield, battered and bruised. The once proud alien forces were now a shell of their former selves, their morale shattered and their confidence lost. Zorak stood at the command deck, staring at the screen in front of him. The humans had already made their move, pushing deeper into his territory, relentless and unyielding. They were no longer just surviving, they were fighting to win, and they had already taken control of the battlefield. Zorak's heart raced as he felt the weight of defeat press down on him. He had underestimated them at every turn, and now there was no turning back. The humans had turned the tide of the war. With their relentless persistence, their armor, once thought to be a weakness, had become their greatest strength. Every time Zorak's forces attacked, the humans adapted. Every blast, every strike, only made them more powerful, more focused, and more determined. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics that made them formidable. It was their spirit, their unyielding will to survive and fight back against any enemy. Zorak had underestimated that spirit, and now his fleet was paying the price. As Zorak stared at the screen, he saw it, the final human push. A massive wave of soldiers, their armor glowing with energy, advanced on his fleet with unstoppable force. Their weapons fired with deadly precision, cutting through the alien defenses. With ease, Zorak watched in horror as his best troops, the ones he had placed at the front lines, were overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the human assault. "They are relentless," Zorak whispered to himself, his voice filled with disbelief. How are they still fighting? How are they so strong? It wasn't just the armor anymore. The humans were using everything they had, every scrap of energy, every tactic they had learned from this battle, and every ounce of willpower they had left. Zorak could see it now. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for their future, for their right to exist in a galaxy that had long underestimated them. And that was something Zorak could never have anticipated. "Commander, our defenses are collapsing," one of his officers reported, his voice shaking with fear. "The humans are breaking through. We can't hold them back any longer." Zorak's mind raced. He had no more moves left. His fleet was exhausted, out of resources and out of time. The humans were about to deliver the final blow. He had seen this before in other battles where the enemy pushed to the very edge, using everything they had until their last breath. But this was different. The humans weren't on the edge. They were charging forward, unstoppable, like a storm that couldn't be outrun. "They won't stop," Zorak said quietly, almost to himself. "They've already won." With a heavy heart, Zorak gave the order to retreat. It was the only option left. He had no choice but to admit defeat. The humans had proven themselves to be more than just a nuisance. They had become a force to be reckoned with, and in doing so, they had changed the course of the war. As the alien fleet began its retreat, Zorak couldn't shake the feeling of shame that washed over him. He had come to this planet with confidence, ready to crush the human forces in minutes. Instead, he had been forced to watch as the humans, with their primitive armor and unconventional tactics, had not only held their ground but had overwhelmed his forces. He had underestimated them, and now it was too late to change the outcome. The humans had won. There was no denying it. Zorak watched as the last of his fleet made its way into deep space, leaving behind a battlefield filled with the wreckage of what had once been a powerful force. The humans, standing victorious, had proven one simple truth: they were not to be underestimated. They had shown the galaxy that no matter the odds, no matter the challenge, they would never back down. Zorak's fleet was broken, his warriors defeated, and the humans were now the victors. They had outlasted him, outsmarted him, and defeated him in ways he couldn't have imagined. The final showdown had come, and in the end, it wasn't just the armor that made the difference. It was the human spirit. The drive to never give up, no matter the cost. As Zorak watched the humans celebrate their victory, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same again. The humans had proven they were capable of far more than anyone had ever believed. And now they would carry that strength into the future, changing the course of history forever.